Hey there, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. And I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. The EduData podcast is your no-fluff guide to the data driving higher education. Forget about data silos and disconnected stacks. Timothy Davis and Jamie Boggs, two of Element 451's data analysis experts, bring you straight into the heart of the numbers that matter. With sharp commentary and rigorous research, our hosts break down complex data points and actionable insights you can use. Whether you're an administrator, educator, or just a higher ed enthusiast, EduData is your key to unlocking the data behind academia. New episodes drop every Friday morning, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search the EduData podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell, Community Engagement Lead at Pathify. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a proud member of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow every day. Explore all of our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
All right, everybody, we are here recording live in person at South by Southwest EDU 2024. We've got a lineup of amazing guests that you'll hear kind of throughout the coming weeks of all the folks that I'm talking to here in Austin. So it's a unique, fun opportunity to be able to talk to people in person. So I appreciate everybody making the time for this. But our first episode here is with Don Fraser from Ed Design Lab. We'll start as we always do. If you want to introduce yourself to everybody, kind of give an overview of your professional background and what led you to the Education Design Lab.
Sure. First, thanks for having me, Dustin. Glad to be a part of this. South by EDU is always a fun one for me, so I'm happy to be able to contribute. As you mentioned, I am at Education Design Lab. I'm the Senior VP for Design and Innovation, which means I really have two buckets of work. One is it's how we do what we do. So Education Design Lab is very much focused on the future of work and learning and designing solutions in that space. To design solutions that we believe will serve the people who are most proximate to the problems that we're trying to tackle, we use human-centered and equity-centered design. And that really is an art form, and it's one that we have been able to shape over the last 10 years or so, and we continue to really iterate on that, improve it, continue to look at it to make sure that we can do that work well with our partners. And then there's innovation, and that's used, I think, very loosely, that word. For us, innovation really is about looking at what's disrupting the space that we work in. So anything that's either around the corner or around the next corner is of interest to my team. So that's really the work I'm focused on.
I've known about Education Design Lab for a little while. There's somebody that I knew that worked there years ago, so at least just sort of put like a little bug in my brain about it. And just being really impressed that I feel like there's no one else that I'm aware of, I guess, at least maybe not aware of so kind of intimately, like doing the work that you're doing the way that you're doing it, that kind of thing. So like it's just been really fascinating to follow. And I think what I kind of observed too is that like a core part of your team's work seems to center around diverse pathways to education and to careers. And, I think that's something that I've started to explore a lot more this year on the podcast is sort of like workforce development and just all the different angles to that. But like from your point of view, like what makes that so important?
Well, we know that getting from, let's just say K-12 to career is not as linear as it once was, right? This idea that the best next step might be for somebody to go on to higher education is not necessarily as clearly defined now, or even if you talk to employers, necessary. So when you think about this idea of what it means to learn so that you can be in the workforce, that's really how we're thinking about the work that we do. There's a box that we work in and play in at the lab, and that's education, right? It's got a form, it's got a function, but it also needs some massaging, right? In some cases, some redesigning. So it really is thinking about how, if we're saying we want to get people into careers, into paths that put them on a trajectory to be prosperous, whatever that means, right? Then how do we think about and reverse engineer from that point? And nowadays, because learning can be acquired in so many different ways, formally, informally, length of time varies so dramatically, right? That for us are all these market signals. And if you're looking at that, then you're saying, well, what should K-12 be doing if that is the new reality? What should higher education be doing if that is the new reality? And that drives a lot of the work that we do. So it makes you think about pathways differently than we thought about them 5 or 10 years ago. Pathways is not a new concept for sure, but when you think about the design of it, the arc of it, the purpose of it, who's building it, those are all new things that we're considering.
Something that I love, we're here at South by EDU, like it's a unique intersection of all the sort of complex different stakeholders that especially are like relevant to your work and everything. Like, is that what kind of like resonates with you, like about being in a space like this? Is because it's maybe one of those few opportunities to sort of intersect with all those different people?
Absolutely. And the development, the arc of South by also has been, more early days K-12, very K-12 focused, right? And now you see a lot more folks who are workforce, just the ecosystem of attendees has expanded dramatically. The content, what people are talking about, and that really is very much how we have evolved organizationally as well. When we started our early days, you talked about us not being niche. Well, we kind of were in the very early days, right? And which is why nobody understood us. And for many years, it was like honing this craft, but then realizing that to do this work and to build solutions that have really transformative impact, you need to expand what we would call like our core design team or our extended design team to include other stakeholders. Some are on the campus, some are not on the campus. Some may be government officials, some may be in workforce development. So nowadays, to be able to move the needle in a way that we want to, that has to be the case, right? So that's exciting. And yes, being at South by, you see more of that also now happening here. So the evolution between who's attending here and the content here, pretty similar to our own arc.
I think it probably was important for a design lab story to start where it's like, okay, let's just like focus on, one aspect, like do that well, then maybe like expand that. Cause I feel like that sometimes you see where it's like certain organizations, it's like, okay, that's a very lofty goal or it seems very vague or sort of unfocused. And it's like, okay, well, we did our homework to kind of deep dive somewhere and then recognize and acknowledge and then just kind of build upon that to get across the whole ecosystem. Because I think that's just like an aspect of this, just trying to kind of harness and grapple with that complexity. Like just from sort of like a personal take, like how do you sort of like stay motivated through that? Like what's sort of like, how do you kind of keep your energy up? Because it feels like it could be so daunting and stuff. So how do you kind of like, I guess maybe try to like celebrate the win?
You have to have an appetite for it, right? First of all, and I've been in education my entire career. Started as a high school guidance counselor, right? So I was just talking about this earlier this morning too. In fact, that the complexity, ambiguity, predictive nature of guidance, right? Which is all those things. Is like whatever you thought your day was going to be, it's probably not going to be whatever that is, right? And the work that we do, which in many cases, you're sort of like on the razor's edge, thinking about, how to do this in a way that serves our partners to the fullest extent, helps them serve their learners even better than they already do, and then actually starts to move the field forward is a careful balance, right? Because you are going to ruffle feathers and rattle cages along the way. You have to be okay with that. You have to be really dogged in that case also, and believe very deeply in what it is you're trying to accomplish. And for us, yeah, I mean, we definitely experience more wins these days than we probably did, 4 or 5 years ago, right? But we take them as they come, but that's not what drives us, right? It's not about the wins. It's about the excitement of doing something that we think is bigger than each one of us at the lab. And I think everybody who comes to work at the lab, they're entrepreneurial in spirit. They are passionate educators and thinkers, and we're just like really hell-bent on making a difference in this space.
What I'm hearing from that too is that idea of like, you maybe sign a partnership or some deal or something like that. The idea of like, okay, we're going to work with this institution or this organization to do something, and like that's sort of like the win. But then it's like, that's kind of just the beginning. Like now we actually have to like do it and make sure that we're doing right by students and, foundations and organizations and donors and whoever else and all these sort of things. So I noticed too, like fair number of like the partners on kind of the higher ed side to kind of bring, my sort of bread and butter, I guess, my sort of point of view. Like you work with a lot of community colleges in particular. It's just kind of what I noticed. I don't think, exclusively so or anything like that. But how do you see them maybe just, uniquely suited to support your efforts? It feels like they do kind of have like a relevant or sort of applicable role in sort of the whole pathway and kind of continuum and everything. But like, what's your take on maybe, are they more uniquely suited than other institutions, or just your take on their position?
First of all, I mean, community colleges play such an important role, right, in their communities for the learners they're trying to serve and for the businesses that they're trying to serve as well. So just the fact that they are centered on trying to be a vehicle for change in their communities and being locally focused is admirable and challenging as hell, right? So you've got that fact. Then couple that with who they serve, right? And the accessibility of the learning there and the experience. The learners that we care very deeply about, historically, they overpopulate community colleges, right? So that's where we're going to find the learners that we care deeply about trying to serve through the work that we do. And then finally, I will say that the fact that they already have relationships with employers or the world of work, right? The fact that they listen to employers and they use some of the feedback that they're getting from employers to ensure that they are doing the right work and learning with their learners are reasons why, when you think about this future of alignment around learning and what the workforce needs, makes them pretty uniquely positioned to accelerate that work.
Yeah, and I think it's that idea that like literally they're positioned in the ecosystem, and sometimes they're like literal geographic position, like they're just in more places,
right.
And all that, and like you said, like the relationship they have, or just sort of the I don't know, the best word I can think of is like the brand identity, like the way that people think about them is the idea that like this will quickly give me the skills to get towards a job. And I think now recognizing too how important it is of like, learn to get the job that's going to help you learn to get the next, find that idea of like, okay, if you get this certificate, and can work at Google in sort of a very entry level position, like, hopefully you can take advantage of like education benefits and then kind of,
right.
pursue something else from there, that it can kind of be iterative in that sense more so.
Yeah.
Or, just the idea that you don't have to like fully commit to a 4-year degree that you kind of hope pays off in the end.
Right. Yeah, they've definitely leaned into, because they've been oriented all along between certificates and the idea of more bite-sized learning, right? So knowing that that's something that learners maybe are looking for, or at least need more options around, that community colleges have already been in that space, right? So they can take advantage of the new way in which maybe learners want to consume learning.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I feel like this is going to be probably a question I ask a lot of people while we're here this week, is like that idea too of like how learners want to learn, when it's sort of like, what am I learning, the pace that I'm learning it, and then certainly at this point, like 4 years out from the emergency remote learning and everything, and just kind of normalizing digital education more, like how do you see maybe that balance of like, well, I want in-person maybe community or some sort of like kind of foundation, but like certain courses, depending on what it is, I could learn online and maybe do the lab in person. Like, how do you see maybe now that we can reach hopefully a place where it's sort of like the best of both worlds for, I think it's that idea of certain learners, and certainly maybe ones you might have stopped out before, or whatever else, where it's just like, okay, we're creating hyper relevant, efficient programs and everything, and that are going to be super supportive of you, where you are, taking advantage of sort of maybe the institutional resources that are available to you nearby, and then like sort of augmenting that with like digital learning. Like, do you see maybe kind of like a near future version where there is sort of that like best of both worlds for supporting these kind of learners and everything? Like,
definitely, and we're experiencing it already, right? So it's becoming probably our new normal, and that's a good thing, right? Because when you think about, just look at the N, how many people and who is enrolled in higher education, the overwhelming majority of those folks are, maybe they're taking a single class. They're working, they're adults, right? These are folks who are trying to inch forward and get something that is going to help me make a next step, right, in the direction I want to head as a professional, as a person. So their ability to be able to do that in a way that allows them to continue to live the life they're living, not give up elements of the life that they are living, right? Give up time with my family, give up time that I don't have, right? Making sacrifices that aren't fair to ask people to make. That's the world I believe we're headed towards, thankfully, because education can be and should be more individualized than it has been.
yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that was like the core of what I was kind of thinking about, is that idea that like you want to access a resource or learn online, that's an option. You want to do everything in person, that's an option. You want to do hybrid, that's an like, and the idea that like that's not maybe just sort of like a novelty, or just sort of a like, well, we're still kind of like emerging from, everything was all digital all the time. Trying to see it, I guess, just like people independently ask that same kind of question, is like, how do you see maybe that new kind of, hybrid frontier sort of shaking out? And yeah, I think for a confluence of reasons of maybe just like, well, we can't just keep building new buildings, and student demands are different, and there's just been much more exposure on all sides from staff and faculty and students to just like, what does this actually look like and feel like? And yeah, the idea that like, depending on student schedules, it's like, okay, how do we make our staff more accessible and available to support students? And like time poverty, and just like, that's so much of like a thing that's holding back. And it's like, okay, how do we just create a whole ecosystem, whether it's online, in person, sort of like, self-service kind of thing, like just make sure every sort of like, corner of this academic journey that the student is on, like we're trying to remove those points of friction and everything. And I think just that thought process, and just like flexible, personalized, individualized, and just like really kind of, transparent, and just how can institutions kind of strive towards that, and how can they work with partners, whether it's an ed tech company or employer or whoever else to
Right,
kind of
right,
reach towards
right.
that.
I mean, it's exciting that institutions are thinking differently about this, right? But at the same time, there's a role that they can play in helping build a better consumer of learning. Because how do you really know what works best for you as a learner, right? Yeah, just because I don't have time, I might think that not getting in the car to go 20 minutes each direction to take that class sounds better, right? So I take it online. But is that better for you in your acquisition of learning? Is that better for you in building a network when you might be somebody who does that better face-to-face with people, right? So I think there is something we need to do to help people understand that when you make choices, you're making them for the right reasons, right? But if it's opaque to me and I don't actually know what makes that experience, that modality different or better, then I might be making the wrong choice, right? So there's a role I think that we need to play in higher education in general needs to play in helping consumers better understand the choices that they can make around how they can learn.
Very well said. Because I think that is something I think anybody could sort of anecdotally see where students just want online because they think it'll be better for them or more convenient and all that. And it could be even that idea where it's like, okay, well, we know better. We can't assume that they're going to know better. Let's choose which courses make more sense to be just like a completely self-paced asynchronous, online course, one that is has live sessions, or where it's just like, I don't think this one really makes sense to do, online. So, but then even that idea where you can still digitally augment your classroom spaces or how to use your LMS or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So, good stuff. As we wrap up, I feel like this is a pretty big question, a big one to end on, and just kind of take it as you will. But higher ed's going through a disruptive time right now, and the things that you're talking about and mentioning, these are the things that folks are grappling with and trying, to maintain relevancy and making sure that students are kind of taking what they're offering and all that kind of stuff. So with all this kind of disruption that's been going on in higher ed, how do you see the work that you and your team are doing helping to kind of shepherd higher ed through this sort of disruptive, tumultuous?
Again, at the lab, we are, we're a group that is highly optimistic about education. We believe deeply that education can be a vehicle for people to achieve their goals personally, professionally, as a learner, as a worker. So we're always approaching it from that point of view. When you think about the attack and the duress under which higher education is currently, where you've got people questioning the ROI as costs rise, people aren't sure about the outcomes afterwards, if those are actually aligning to the jobs or the experiences that people hope that they get. There is a bit of a go slow to go fast approach. And I think what we bring to the table is helping people to have conversations that they need to have but don't usually have the space to have. So when they're thinking about so many of the assets and capabilities they already have, things that they're already doing really well, it's not wholesale changes always that people need, right? It may just be a different approach. It may be tilting it on its axis a little bit to really key into a need that a learner has or key into a need that an employer has. So the nature of our work really gets at those data points and insights that lie beneath the surface. And that's something that, again, when you're just trying to fight off the challenges right now, it's pretty hard to have those conversations. It's pretty hard to commit space to have those moments, right, and critical discussions, which may lead to dramatic change, but may also be things that actually, if you just do them and can move forward, and they may sound a little risky, right, they could have a return that could be completely transformative, not just for the institution, but for the learners, for the people who work there. I think it's a great time for education right now, and I think the duress that that the field is experiencing is because of the opportunity that we have. It's not because of what we have historically haven't been able to do. It's really about what we feel like we can and should be doing moving forward. And it's just a different framing, really. It's pretty easy to kind of go to a pessimistic point of view or be negative about it, but it's time that higher education has like a much more positive narrative. They need it right now, right, in the field, but I think we're moving in that direction. So we're excited to be a part of it. We're excited to lead in certain spaces, and we're excited to work with the people out there who are doing like-minded work.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. I think institutions we're very long-term focused in a sense, say like a decade plus ago, and it's like some institutions maybe, because the momentum is going back in the other direction, be like, well, we need to be more like short-term focus in the sense of like what is needed right now. Let's try to address that and adapt as time goes on. But I feel like some institutions went too far, and they're just sort of like whack-a-moling problems with no long-term strategy,
right.
Or this is something that I've heard some people remark on, where it's like you're trying to like cut your way to growth, where it's just like, oh, just keep like laying people off, cut programs and all that. And it's like, okay, well, then what next? And it's just like, I don't know, like more cuts or something. Like
right.
You can't like necessarily cut your way to growth. It's you can be like, well, we're here, we could just like try to cut down our expenses. And it's like, well, if your like revenue keeps just still kind of going down, it's like, well, then we just like cut more next year or something. Like that idea, it's like, well, bring in a new, fresh outside perspective, or bring in these external stakeholders, help them help you to kind of inform your strategy and, kind of take you into what's next if you feel as though you may be at a loss. And the idea of like all this potential, all this opportunity, and all these different paths that you could take, in terms of your institutional strategy, it's like, kind of like try to bring that pendulum back a little bit, to be a little bit slower and try to like, break down, how you can kind of, I don't know, build piece by piece where you kind of steer yourself more in the direction, even though it's like, there's going to be kind of a cone of like, we need to kind of steer in this direction. We might kind of keep kind of moving and adjusting as, things maybe happen at a policy level or whatever else. But, generally we should be kind of steering in this direction and getting to a place where we can be a bit more nimble and flexible and personalized.
Right.
And those sort of like action verbs, I guess, are kind of ringing.
Yeah, and just think about the massive opportunity that exists when you know that the shelf life of skills and learning is so much shorter, right? I had a bachelor's in psychology, right? People listening can't see the look on my face right now, right? But this reality that it's like, what skills does that degree represent? We know that employers are really interested in people who are interested in learning, right? That the world in which we live and work now, we have to continue to learn, right? So that wasn't something that people needed to do 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? So higher education should be thinking about that and saying, that learner, those alum, those are folks that could be lifelong consumers at my institution, right? So it's a reframe and it's an opportunity, but hey, if you like a brand, human nature is to stick with it, right? So if you do well by somebody, I'm going to keep coming back, right, to get the next thing, get that next bit of learning, right? So it's a massive opportunity, right? And if higher education, 2- and 4-year schools can lean into that reality, then they're going to be meeting the needs that employers are so desperately in search of.
Yeah. And I guess the joke that I thought of because of that, of like the idea where it's like the detergent I arbitrarily chose 10 years ago that I still buy just because I've been buying it. The idea that it's like, okay, if you more intentionally try to court that sort of affinity and, affection and commitment and everything, it's just like, think of the possibilities.
Yep.
But we will wrap up the question that we always kind of just end on to kind of put a nice bow on this conversation here. Final thought, call to action on this topic to wrap up the episode.
Call to action. The thing that I've been most excited about are the emerging and different partnerships that you see in this learn and work space, right? People recognizing that they need to have certain conversations that they either weren't accustomed to having, thought they didn't need to have, felt there was no benefit to have. People are letting go of that, right? And because of that, they're learning so much more about the other person's point of view and the work that somebody else is trying to accomplish. And, we're less adversarial when we're doing that, right? And we're more collaborative, and we can actually start to think about solutions in a different way, and recognizing that we all have a part in it. And when we're at the table to think about those, to work on those, then we're more likely to solve it, right? So I'm excited that people are leaning into that, and I hope that continues.
Yeah, great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much for hanging out and sharing what you did. We'll have ways to connect with you and at Design Lab in the description for the episode. But just good to see you here and helping us to kick off the whole week.
Excited to be here, Dustin. Glad you're doing this, and looking forward to the week ahead.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.